Next, I consider her a good friend. She comes to, all we have to do is call her and tell her what we need, and she's here. Mayor Robin Lawbaugh.
Certainly my pleasure to be here. I really do look forward each and every year to see you, to be here, and to recognize the great good that each one of you are doing. This is a special event each and every year that has been going on with the Blind Golf and the partnership with Blind Golf and Wounded Warriors. We recognize the sacrifices and the service that has been given, and we are grateful for the ongoing dedication that is put towards those that are certainly in need, but also that need to be recognized and cared. It is my pleasure tonight on behalf of the city to offer a special proclamation to someone who is here that we'd like to give a special notation, and she happens to be sitting here at the table, Cindy. Cindy Parsons. So I'll have you come on up here.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
But this is, yeah. But this is a proclamation on behalf of the Office of the Mayor. We recognize your advocacy on behalf of the Wounded Warriors. We recognize that you and your family, and certainly your son, have gone through a tremendous amount and are continuing to go through a tremendous amount. But you're doing something very worthwhile in advocating for not only your son and your family, but also for all those that have gone through situations that we wish that didn't happen, but we recognize that comes with protecting our country and protecting others. So on behalf of the City of Wadsworth, we want to first of all welcome you and show our gratitude for you being here and continuing your advocating and doing what you do. So I would like to mention this. This is a proclamation on behalf of the Office of the Mayor, and it states, whereas the Wounded Warriors Project and American Blind Golf Association have partnered to raise additional awareness and funds, and whereas Cindy Parsons, national spokesperson for the Wounded Warriors Speak team, is a tireless advocate for the Wounded Warriors and is personally invested with her son Shane, who suffered serious injuries during his service in the U.S. military. And whereas Cindy lobbied Congress for the passage of the Caregiver and Veteran Omnibus Health Service Act of 2010 that provides assistance and stipends for those who support and care for wounded soldiers. And whereas the Wounded Warrior Project now has 20 programs and services for wounded soldiers and caregivers and has honored its commitment to serve 100,000 soldiers by 2017. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Robin L. Lawbaugh, deem it a pleasure to proclaim June 22nd, 2017, to be set aside in the City of Wadsworth in recognition of Cindy Parsons for her advocacy and unwavering support for the Wounded Warriors Project. Signed and sealed this 22nd day of June, 2017, Robin L. Lawbaugh, Mayor of Wadsworth.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's so unexpected.
I know. Well worth it. Okay. Are you going to introduce the people?
Yeah, I'm just going to do a couple things, and then I'll
You're gonna
introduce
introduce-
Cindy formally to speak then.
And you're going to introduce Emily?
Oh, yes. Oh, you hand over.
No, you.
All right. So you tell me when you want me to do stuff.
Okay, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mark Arnold. And hey. I was going to say Cesar Carino, but. All right, Mark. You have it. You got it until the end.
All right, so I promise I will not say one more thing. If you hear me say one more thing, I'm sitting down, okay? Just a few things. you know, when you come to events like this, you have to sit through the unending thank yous, but you're the captive audience, so I'm gonna do a few. First of all, reiterating about since 5 years ago, just about 5 years ago today, when we first flew Devin and Stetson up and started this whole partnership, the funds we have raised have exploded. This is not a bragging thing, but this tournament started in 2005. This year, we'll go over the $250,000 mark in total donations to the Veterans Initiatives and our Student Adaptive Technology Scholarships. And that's exploded solely because of when I knocked on the Legion's door back in early January of 2012 and told them what we had in mind. They just said, tell us when and where. And ever since then, the food that they provide to our events, anytime we need anything, as Joe said, Doc, Nancy, Brian, Amy from the VFW, all the folks, they have been incredibly supportive of our organization and what we try to do. So that we'd be remiss if we didn't say that. And just a couple things before I introduce Cindy. This is a little bragging thing about American Blind Golf, but those of you in attendance need to understand this. There are people who are here from Western Canada, from Georgia, from Texas, from Massachusetts, from all over the country who come here to compete in a blind golf tournament to win a hat, to win a title. And the title is important to us, but I'm here to tell you that the majority of our players are not here to win a title. They're here for us to live up to our motto of our wristbands that say motivate, inspire, and serve. And this tournament, these folks, everybody here would not be here if not for American Blind Golf bringing a major championship to Wadsworth. So I would like to just do a couple recognitions of our players, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to do this from memory first before I just let everyone know our champions this year. So you folks out there, the players and coaches, you can remind me if I skip you, okay? So as I read your names, I want you to stand and stay standing, and then I'll let everyone know why I'm doing this. So Phil Blackwell, please stand. United States Navy veteran, Vietnam era. Brad Eaton is not here. United States Coast Guard, a player, Vietnam era. David Burnett. Is David here? Canadian military, artillery. Bruce Hooper, United States Air Force. I missed anyone? So there's another connection between American Blind Golf and Veteran Initiatives. So, gentlemen, thank you for your service. Okay, so little blind golf history. We compete in 3 site categories. So we had 3 champions this week, along with a senior champion and a Stableford champion. So we will start with our B3 champion, which would be an individual with site 2,200 or less. So from Pennsylvania, please recognize Tommy Marks and his brother Bob that coached him this week. So. B2 site category is the category that I compete in. Your vision must be less than 2,600 all the way down to light perception. So our champion this year from Texas, Charles Adams, and his coach, Nate Klein. So. And I can't say this enough about the realm of blind sports, but I've played sports all my life. I've been a huge sports fan. I truly say this from the heart. One of the most incredible athletic things I have ever witnessed is a totally blind person play golf. And we have in our midst, folks, you want to call someone the king, but Phil Blackwell, please stand, and his wife Sybil. I couldn't tell you the number of national and world championships that Phil has had. So. Our senior champion, again, folks, flying all the way from British Columbia. And a little thing about blind golf. George, how much was your airline ticket to get here? $600 plus, I think, to win a hat. So, I mean, just an amazing thing that our players come to support this champion, but our senior champion, George Thurkill from Canada, and his coach, Roger Klein. And a friend of mine for a long time, we have an overall Stableford champion, and we've played together, been rivals for a long time, and it always seems like Rick comes up a point or two short every year, and this year for the Stableford Championship, he did not come up short. So the overall Stableford champion from Canada, Rick Cush, and his coach, Chris. So I'm almost done. I don't have anything else to say, but it is our incredible pleasure. Those of you who've been with us for the last 5 years know we've had some incredible folks that have come into town to help us honor and celebrate the service of our veterans, particularly those who are injured in battle. It was, still will be till I die, the most incredible privilege I ever had meeting Devin and Stetson. Through the years, we've had Jason. Sal has been here. Stetson's brother came and did the concert last year. And Devin will attest, I've been pestering him and pestering Jesse for years, last few years, that we wanted a caregiver. And there's way too many bonds between blind golf and Wounded Warriors to go into, but as blind golfers, we cannot play the game we love without a coach. That's long gone in my past. I can't play anymore without a coach. And those injured servicemen and women that come back need people to keep them afloat, so to speak. And so this year, it's our incredible honor. She'll speak in a minute, and she'll also speak at the golf course tomorrow. I won't tell her story because that's why she's here, but it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Cindy Parsons. So, thank you for coming.
This comes off, right? Can I take this off? Do you mind? I do want to roam. Just pull it out. There we go. Yes, thank you. I'm just more comfortable if you don't mind me stepping out there. I'm more comfortable. Before I begin, I'm going to go a little off task. Emily's my boss, so yes, she's our team leader, our team manager. So Emily Gray, please stand. We love Emily. She's a New Yorker. Yay! And I'm even going a little more off task because I just feel compelled. My father was the United States Army as well as National Guard, and his most famous pastime or most favorite was golf, and I used to caddy for him as a young girl. So I am totally amazed by American Blind Golf, and if I know he's right here with us, so I had to give that shout out. His name was Joe. Another Joe? Oh, okay. Life can be brutal. A person's experience in their life can change their whole outlook. They can become bitter, or you can become better. It's about our military, those true heroes who chose to do something bigger than their life as they chose to take that step forward to serve our country. Those that give their life for our freedom, for us to be here today. And many thousands that change their life and they sacrifice to live every day with invisible wounds of war and the physical catastrophic wounds. The most difficult part, though, is returning back to civilian life. How do you turn that switch off when you're in war? How do you come back and just in one day flip that switch off? It's the most incredible, difficult part of transitioning back. Those extraordinary obstacles that our warriors come back to are beyond our comprehension. But the most difficult part, along with their families, is trying to comprehend how do you live life in a different way after what they've experienced. We know that well because the two most major concerns of war in Afghanistan and Iraq are post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, the invisible wounds of war. We know that well. I'm a mom. I'm a nurse. I worked in a community hospital as an ER nurse, and I was working a 12-hour shift on a Saturday morning when I got a phone call that changed everything. When I picked the phone up, I thought it was my son calling from, he was serving in Iraq, in the United States Army. My only child. For you see, his father died of brain cancer when he was 6 months old, so I've been a widow ever since. But when that phone rang and I picked it up and those words still echo today, your son has been critically wounded, I dropped to my knees. And I remember in my mind being so angry and wondering, that can't be us. It's got to be somebody else. But it was. Why not? It was us. And I remember getting on that plane to meet him in Germany, because they bring our wounded back into Landstuhl, Germany. And I remember screaming in my mind, Shane, don't you die. I know you can do this. And I tell people he finally listened to his mom. And fight he did. As I entered that room, all of my knowledge as an ER nurse left the window because I saw my strong, handsome young man swollen beyond recognition with every type of equipment to maintain life. But the most difficult part for me was a tube protruding out of his brain. For you see, that day, September 30th of 2006, my son volunteered for a mission on his day off to prevent anti-coalitions from attacking our troops. When an improvised explosive device was detonated, it immediately severed his left leg, damaged the right leg. His gunner, who was seated at the right, also lost a left leg and had arm and facial damage. But you know what? They didn't win. They didn't get their way because they all survived. And as he was treated on site, he was actually cardiac arrest on site. Then the Black Hawk helicopters came. They resuscitated him, and when he arrived at the Baghdad cache, he expired once more. But I also like to tell people we have to take part in understanding that we need to give a little round of applause for our medical teams, our nurses, our doctors, our Navy corpsmen, our medics, because they saved my son's life, as well as many other warriors. So let's give them a round of applause. So as Shane didn't really know who I was because he was so severely injured. They diagnosed him as having above-knee bilateral amputations because, by the way, they had to amputate that right leg to save his life. He was 21 years old. But they couldn't find blood flow, so they amputated his left leg, or his right leg, because his left leg was already severed. So when I did walk in that room and I saw that tube protruding from his brain, I realized this is really bad. I knew in my training, I'm not sure he's going to make it. But you know what? I still yelled at him. You know, you fight, don't you die. And as we get back to stateside at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, he remained in a coma. They had to actually put him in a barbiturate coma because he was so unstable. And as I enter that room again, I asked the physicians, you know, what's the prognosis? What do you see? They really couldn't answer me because his brain was so swollen. And what had happened is when he passed away, expired, no blood and oxygen got to the brain. So his prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe died. 21 years old. So when he finally did wake up, he didn't know who I was. He called everybody grandma. And I just wondered, will he ever remember? And maybe it was a blessing that he didn't remember parts of it, but I still, will he ever know who I am as a mom? I left my career as a nurse, stayed at his side, and I remember as he started to wean him off the medication, he did recognize me and he asked me, Mom, where the hell have you been? I said, I've been here every day. And that's when rehab began. Well, one of the most pivotal moments of my son's hospital stay was when Wounded Warrior Project came into his room. And they walked in and they went right up to Shane. And he still didn't really recognize what was going on with the swelling of the brain, his little fuzzy eye movement, and wasn't too sure. But they went up to him and they said, Shane, we're here for you and your mother. And if there's anything you need, let us know. As they gave him a backpack filled with comfort items. And we didn't understand the significance of that day. I didn't understand that it was a nonprofit, nonpartisan group that their whole idea is to help that transition into civilian life. And the more importantly, the significance of knowing that they were there for any of our needs. And that continued on with 20 programs and services free to honor and empower wounded warriors. And a vision to foster the most successful generation of wounded service members in the history of any war. Little did we know that they were the gap to help us continue on in services that were so much needed. I mean, we hadn't been in war since what, Gulf War, and before that, Vietnam. We were not prepared for those invisible wounds, the traumatic brain injury, and the continuation of post-traumatic stress. I know in this room I don't have to talk too much. We have some military. They understand what post-traumatic stress means. With Shane, that continued on. His rehab were not days of rehab, not weeks, but months into years of rehabilitation because he had to relearn everything all over again. But little did we know that Wounded Warrior Project was always there, no matter where he was at. Now, he ended up not only at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, but then they sent him to Minneapolis, Minnesota for traumatic brain injury rehab. Again, I never left his side. Meanwhile, during that time, I lost my home to water damage, but that didn't matter because I had my son. I didn't return home for almost 2 years. It really didn't matter. From Minneapolis, Minnesota for traumatic brain injury rehab, we ended up at San Antonio, Brooke Army Medical Center, and where he did some training for the Center for Intrepid for prosthetic training, as well as Brooke Army Medical. But at that time, they didn't have a traumatic brain injury team, so he's outsourced. And who was at the Center for the Intrepid? Wounded Warrior Project staff again, encouraging Shane along the way. Everywhere we went. I didn't mention at Minneapolis, we had Melissa Stockwell, who is a single amputee. She would come to help Shane with prosthetic training as well to see him stand up and show that he could do it because she's missing a pretty high up amputee. As time went on, Shane, he was struggling. It was very difficult. When we were in San Antonio, he wouldn't come out of his room there for a while. He wanted to stay in his room, and he would only come out for his rehab and go right back to his room. So I was really concerned. Once he was finished with that, he ended up going to a brain injury home to help him learn more independence. He spent less than a year, and he absolutely hated it. I seen a downward spiral with Shane. He started to get depressed, so he came home. And when he came home, that spiral actually increased. We live in a small community. He didn't have that support of other warriors like himself. You know, when he was with the warriors at Center for the Intrepid, at least he knew those were other amputees, other warriors that felt the way he did. So Wounded Warrior Project reached out and said, you know, we have a program for Shane that would really help him. And this was called the Independence Program. And what the Independence Program, they bring in a team. You have a community support worker, Shane, the caregiver as well, such as myself. And you kind of brainstorm and you work together. But the whole idea of the Independence Program is getting them back out in the community. Because you know what these guys want? All they want is what they've lost. The independence, the self-confidence back, to belong, and that desire to be more independent because they lost it. My son couldn't drive anymore. He lost the ability to read and write. He has short-term, long-term memory losses. Imagine going to a restaurant and you pick up a menu and you can't read it. So when we sat at that table and had the brainstorming, they said, Shane, what do you want to do? He says, I want to coach football. No problem. So the community support worker, remember he can't read, got him to pass CPR certification, because in the state of Ohio you need to have a CPR certification. You have to complete a computer module and pass it before you can coach any youth football or any youth sports, correct? He passed with flying colors with this assistant. Now this family support came in every single day, Monday through Friday, to work with Shane. And I saw a transformation that I cannot explain. When he went out on that field, imagine these 4th and 5th graders at St. Wendlandt Junior High. One was a girl, and their coach runs out there, and then one in a wheelchair. Can you imagine the looks? There were quite many looks, along with the students whispering, you know, they have a coach in a wheelchair. But at the end of every game, I saw this come together and how important it was for Shane, because at the end of every game, they said a prayer, whether they won or lost, and they would all touch Shane. And I remember the tears coming, because that was validation of acceptance, and not only that, teaching our youth to accept our veterans for who they are, and for Shane to live life on his terms. Along with, I kind of worried. We're getting a little old. What's going to happen to Shane? He may be at risk for institutionalization. So along with the Independence Program, we have the Long-Term Support Trust. And that is just what it says. It's a trust fund to help those warriors that have that care, that need a caregiver 24/7, that in case something happens to their caregiver, that they will come in and make sure that he is not pulled out of that house and taken away from his community and all of his support. And they will maintain that long-going, ongoing support. How important is that? So that burden lifted off me, because I understood he's going to be taken care of. You know, I'll have to tell you that despite all of this, Shane still suffers. He has night terrors. He still has hypervigilance. He worries about what doors are open, what doors are closed. Tight spaces, lots of people. You'll see him have to leave 2 or 3 times to get fresh air. That's ongoing. That never stops. But with the programs and services that Shane has been involved with Wounded Warrior Project, it has literally changed his whole life. Not only gave his self-confidence back, but learning, he would go out and go fishing with the guys, hunting, fishing. He even talked me into jumping out of a perfectly good plane. So you could imagine how difficult that was for a mom. I thought I was going to die. And as he exited that plane, he did a somersault because he missed that. He said, I want to see if I can do it again. And he said, you can do anything. He realized he can do anything, just in a different way. Along with, we worried about the depression when he was at home. And Wounded Warrior Project has a program called the Warrior Care Network. This Warrior Care Network, you know, Wounded Warrior Project recognizes that the VA we want to bridge that gap because there's so many of our warriors that are suffering, and sometimes they don't get the timely care that they need. So the Warrior Care Network is for those who have traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder, and they have teamed up with some national academic, medical facilities across the United States. There's 4 of them, and what they will do is they do outpatient care that is a measurable evidence base, and that they continue on after they leave. It's like it's in a 2 to 3 week, I believe, program. And then they work with the families as well. Like they'll FaceTime the families. They teach our warriors like what are those triggers and how to overcome that. And how important is that? Because sometimes I can tell you what Shane's triggers are. If we're driving down the street, he smells diesel and diesel fuel. That's a trigger. Diesel fuel, Iraq, and then trash on the side of the road, a bomb. And he's still to this day, it makes him very nervous. So he's learned to overcome those triggers and how to deal with those triggers, as well as family members, getting them involved so that they understand, how do we help them transition? How do we help them to move on with their life? If Shane was here today, he would just go on and tell you about all the things that he's been exposed to with Wounded Warrior Project. How about cooking classes? Cooking in a wheelchair, that's a little tough, right? I was worried that he's going to burn himself because he did set off the fire alarm at his brain injury home. He was cooking a steak and forgot and left and set the fire station came. I mean, it was a total mess. So he has to learn, remember those triggers and to understand, you don't leave the stove when it's on. But one of the most important things that Shane has in his life has completely changed. We attended a Wounded Warrior Project Summit in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he met a young lady. And that young lady, they had a long-term, they would talk back and forth. She came to visit, and I'm proud to say they got married last year. Yes. So happy. They attend a lot of the Wounded Warrior Project events too. They do the couples cooking. They've done horseback riding together. They just went to a shoot where they were shooting. I guess she beat Shane, so he was pretty pissed off about that. But anything to work together as a couple, and I have to tell you how important that is because Shane would have never met Jennifer if it wasn't for Wounded Warrior Project because she accepted him for who he is. They are going to move to Washington State, so my life is totally going to change because I've been his caregiver for the last 11 years. But I couldn't be more proud of Shane. And if he wheeled in here and you saw him, you'd see that he has no legs, right? But you know what he'd tell you? I'll never have to clip my toenails, and I'll never have stinky feet again. Wounded Warrior Project honors and empowers wounded veterans. But the greatest casualty is being forgotten. We can't forget their sacrifice. And sometimes problems will arise, things change. Things don't stay the same with our warriors. It evolves, it changes. So we have a survey that we have them do every year, and we go by that survey, see how our programs and services are doing, what are their needs, are we meeting the needs, and how are they coming about in their life, as well as their families. Ronald Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We did not pass it in their children's bloodstream. It must be fought for, must be protected for them to do the same." And how important is that? I talk about a caregiver, and for me, giving up everything, I would do it again. And if you ask Shane, he would say, I would do it again for the love of my country, the love of my family, and for my town, my city, my country. I would do it again, whether he knew he was going to lose his legs or not. Life can be brutal. Your life can change. And you can become bitter or you can get better. If anything you learned from today, remember one thing. The greatest casualty is being forgotten. We cannot forget the sacrifices our veterans and our military go through every single day for our freedom. God bless America.
I like to say just a few words. 5, 6 years ago, Mark Arnold come up to me and said, hey, we need a sponsor for the blind golf. We're even going to do the Wounded Warrior. That was one of my best days of my life. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
We really appreciate it here in Wadsworth and the American Legion here, because we stick up for that flag right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I said I wouldn't say one more thing, so I won't. But here's how we'll close. So this is kind of for all the vets, for all the folks at the Legion and the VFW, and for Devin and Stetson. I was thinking about this today, what I wanted to just sort of finish with, but when I was a kid growing up in the 60s, my mom, longtime auxiliary member, the Legion and the VFW, Dad was in the VFW. Sometimes I joke and say I grew up on the floor of the VFW in Wadsworth. But I kind of remember in the 60s when I was a kid, my parents would go just maybe once a year, but they'd go up to the VA hospital. And they'd come home, and I still remember my mom saying, poor old soul. And we're talking about the mid-60s, and she was saying that about World War II veterans who were stuck in the VA hospital for life. And waving the flag about Wounded Warrior Project, and you want to know why I have a passion for it, it's because of what they stand for, what this incredible woman stands for, and the incredible pleasure and privilege it was to meet Devin and Stetson. So if not for those two kids, we wouldn't all be here. Did that do okay, Devin? You get five. You get credit for that? No, his boss is here, but it was our incredible pleasure for them because they are responsible for it all. So thanks for everybody for showing up. We're done. Sorry.